Hello and welcome to today's episode of Flight to Freedom. We are super lucky today. We have Dr. Krista Crotty. I practiced this beforehand and I still got it wrong. Krista Crotty with us today, who is the founder of Brain-Based Therapy Northwest, which is actually a really exciting new eating disorder therapy. And we had a chat just before Christmas, and you had your launch week really recently, didn't you, Krista?
Did. We had it in just the beginning of the year, first part of January.
Amazing. Well, can I hand over to you to fully introduce yourself and say what you do, and then we will have a chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get to talk about TBTS and what we're doing here in the United States. So I'm Dr. Krista Crotty. I'm trained as a clinical psychologist ultimately. So working in therapy, working as a mental health provider here in Washington State in the United States. And we launched just at the beginning of this year, Brain-Based Therapy Northwest, which is taking Dr. Laura Hill, Dr. Stephanie Natz-Peck, Dr. Christina Maringo's work based on Walter Kay's research, temperament-based treatment with supports. We took their 5-day intensive program and launched it for the first time worldwide, privately. So an opportunity for people to seek care in this very unique 5-day intensive treatment that is designed to really support people, especially those with anorexia, who have had anorexia likely for a long time, more severe and enduring. When we look at our adult population, and then we have an adolescent program that runs separately from the adult program that's focused on teens under the age of 18. I'm really supporting them through family-based treatment and incorporating their families. So really excited to finally get to sort of launch this into the world and to see where TBTS, temperament-based treatment with supports, goes. So I've been training with Dr. Hill since 2017, 2018. The pandemic makes things so weird as far as timelines go. So pre-pandemic life, was training with her to launch this. The pandemic happened, so all things went astray, but we're back on track now and open and running, and it's so exciting and so fun. So excited to tell you about it and talk about it with you today, Julia.
So your background before this was still in eating disorder treatment, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I've been so lucky to spend most of my career actually in the eating disorder arena. So I worked before the Emily program. So here, I don't know how much you know about the United States based programs here, but I worked privately in a private practice when I first finished school here in Spokane. So moved back from Southern California to Spokane, Washington. So up in the northwest corner of the United States. And a few years after I opened and was sort of new in my career, the Emily program, which is owned by Aconto Health, came to Spokane and was expanding. And so I opened their facility here in Spokane as their director in 2013, I think was the year, maybe, give or take. And I was with them in some capacity, really on and off, or mostly for the last 10 or so years. So I still play a small role with them here and there. I do a lot of their public speaking and really enjoy that teaching component with them. But yes, I worked in all levels of care, opened a bunch of facilities for Aconto. I've been really lucky to learn great things from working for that organization. So, but yes, most of my career here in the eating disorder arena, and I love it. So,
So what motivated you to transition over to temperament-based treatment then? What did you see in that that lit you up?
so many things. How much time do we have? So I jumped into the TBTS world long before actually I started training. So the program hasn't been around for that long, but in school, I trained in neuropsych. So I worked at Harbor UCLA, I worked at Loma Linda, and was really fascinated by the brain and just its impact on all mental health at the time, not necessarily eating disorders, but was intrigued by it and continued to be very interested in and drawn into the sort of neuropsychological literature, understanding the sort of the basis or the fundamentals of brain functioning with mental health or mental illness in various ways. So when I came into the eating disorder world and really committed to being this as my specialty and this being the sort of the love I have in who I work with, It was great, but there was a really limited data and limited research at that time. There was an interesting new things coming out. Dr. Walter Kay at a University of California, San Diego was really a pioneer. And a lot of that research still is doing amazing work in the Southern California area, researching and understanding really what is happening in the brain for those individuals that are suffering from eating disorders, primarily anorexia. And so a lot of the literature, a lot of the research, brain research is going to be focused on anorexia. There's pros and cons to that, but understanding the why is just homogeneity. Like we just see the most consistency from a research perspective in the individual's presentation in restriction and what happens when there's restriction in the body and what's happening in the brain. So easier data set in some ways to get to. So really started to follow Dr. K's work long before TBTS really was on my radar. And was fascinated and intrigued by how is this going to inform care, because there seemed to be a missing piece. Like I could read all day long all those interesting, fascinating neuro studies, but what am I going to do with it as a clinician? So fast forward, Dr. Laura Hill started a program in Ohio at the Center for Balanced Living, taking Dr. K's research and basically making it come alive clinically. And so she did a TED Talk that you can access online still. It's amazing. Really talking about the ways in which she used her clients in Ohio to help her understand the research and what's going on. Like, how does that feel for each individual client or patient? And then she took that data and actually applied it. So watching and listening and then training with Dr. Hill and her team, the ways in which the science, the brain science that I've always been fascinated by in my education and early career, really come alive to now be able to help people understand the why they might be doing whatever is happening or why that symptom might be presenting in just the neural firing or the brain firing from that neurological basis and the neurobiology of the brain. So I jumped because for the first time, I could actually, in the arena of clinical, like in therapy, be talking with a client and be able to say, maybe the reason why you made that decision with food or that symptom, eating disorder symptom presented itself could be that there was just an abnormal wiring in the brain that sent you down that path. But that doesn't mean you're broken or stuck. It just means we have to then rethink what are we going to do about that? In the same way, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, some people wear glasses. We don't ask you to walk around blind, we give you glasses. So helping people realize that's also an abnormal wiring in the brain, that your eyes aren't working correctly. So the glasses we put on are all the skills and ways we practice and understand the who you are, which I love that part of TBTS where we look at the traits of each person. Traits are not good or bad, but the way they express may be productive or destructive. So how do we use the who you are to be the glasses of your brain when it's wired maybe in a way that isn't very helpful? So I jumped because it finally made sense. Like I was able to give the neurobiology and the education and help you create a plan using who you are. And that was so much more powerful to me than just teaching people the same skills that weren't always working for them. So long answer to your question.
It's a great answer. Thank you. What seems really fascinating to me is that this takes away the blame.
Yes.
A lot of people feel it's their own fault
Mm-mm.
that they have an eating disorder,
Yeah.
and it's not.
Mm-mm.
And this scientifically shows you that it's not, that it's a biological and brain-based
Mm-hmm.
illness.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes away all that blame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure does. Yeah, it's
That's
amazing. There
powerful.
isn't any blame. Yeah, and I love that there's no blame. There's, Walter Kay makes the statement, we all have all these traits, and traits are neurobiological. That good old saying, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. We are very similar to the trees that we grow up around with all, with our parents, the people that influence us. But the tree's not good or bad, but sometimes it expresses in ways that aren't super helpful. And so we just have to correct for that or find ways to use our already inherent strengths to bring back destructive trait expressions. And that's amazing because again, it's more about learning how to be who we are and celebrate our neurobiology and understand that an eating disorder might be in that mix, unfortunately, but there's no fault in that. It's just we have to do something different to function with that neurobiology than maybe the tree next to us or the person next to us. And that's exciting. I think there's a lot of freedom that comes from that. So, yeah.
It's very, very exciting, and it really goes alongside beautifully how I work, which is believing that we have everything within us we need to recover.
Mhm. Yes, we sure
And
do.
this literally shows that we have everything we need within us.
Mhm.
So, can you give examples of traits and temperaments in a really layperson's language so that it's really clear? And is there a set of traits? I think I know the answer to this, but is there a set of traits that people who struggle with anorexia tend to share?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of traits that people with anorexia tend to share. So TBTS is pretty amazing because the researchers have basically come up with a list of commonly presenting. Now, it doesn't mean that 100%. I think that's the other amazing thing that we, as the research side or the practitioner side of people offering this care, are able to say, we know this much, but you, the person who has the eating disorder, is truly the expert on your own illness because we only know what the
I
research has told
love
us,
that.
right? And
I
so then
love
we look.
that.
So then I looked to each client, like just last or a couple weeks ago when I ran my January week, TBTS weeks are very small. So treatment is very small, very individualized to each person and their supports. So in that, everyone did their trait profile checklist, and many of them had some similar traits. But what those actually looked like in their expression were different for each single person. So a really common one, just to like make it quick and easy, would be perfectionism. We see perfectionism in many, many, many. I could go so far, though I don't use the word most, but most or almost all of our clients with anorexia typically align with, to some degree, perfectionism as a common trait
Mhm.
that they have. Well, perfectionism, just the word perfectionism, a person might hear that word and be like, oh, that's negative. I'm actually going to argue it's totally neutral. It's neither good nor bad, right? I would argue, like in our conversation, I don't know you very well, Julia, but like, would you identify as perfectionistic sometimes? I know I do. And so,
Absolutely.
right? And how does perfectionism help you in your world? I could tell you that for me, perfectionism got me up into this meeting and responded to my emails last night and got me ready for my day today. It was very productive. Well, if it were unproductive, it could have got me stuck in maybe my meal or maybe needed to measure certain components of my meal this morning if I were struggling with anorexia, or only being able to eat certain foods or wherever that might express in a destructive way. So TBTS
Mhm.
says, let's not talk about whether or not we have it. We're going to identify whether we have it or we don't, yes or no, but is it productive or unproductive? So if it's unproductive, well, we're never going to take that out of you. I'm always going to be perfectionistic. I would tell you that my dad's that way. My brother's that way. My grandfather was that way. So I can see it all the way down the family tree. I just need it to be helpful, not hurtful to me. So there's 54 traits that we actually use and we provide them to each client. And then each client goes through and just picks them. Yes or no? Is it for me or not me? And then how is it expressing, productive or destructive? So things like perfectionism would be one, persistence, like your ability to just persist, whether things are hard or not hard, impulsivity, what else could I give you? There's so many of them. I could go through so many of the different ones. Some obsessionality. Oh, there's so many that we could, and every person identifies with a different grouping or cluster, and then we just go with those. It's because again, just like what you said, people have in them what's going to help them recover. Unfortunately, those things might also be the things that are keeping them stuck in their illness. So it's a both and in how those are expressing. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally get you. And yes, I do have perfectionism traits. And yes, they used to be very destructive,
Right.
but now they are
Now they're
productive.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so seeing
So
that even in yourself, right? Like you've told your own story. I mean, you could identify, wow, like, yeah, if a therapist had said, we're just going to get rid of your perfectionism, how would that make you feel? Versus, all right, we just have this thing called perfectionism. Let's work with it. So,
yeah, I don't think I would have believed it possible, to be honest, to completely get rid of it. But to make it productive, yeah, that's absolutely possible.
it's possible.
And I love the fact that this is giving clients control and responsibility
Mhm.
for their own recovery. Because from my experience, a lot of times in traditional treatment, responsibility seems to be taken away.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah. In what way do you see it taken away in traditional treatment?
Um, no choices over when to eat, what to eat,
Mhm. Yeah. Right.
how to manage behaviors.
Mhm.
It seemed to be a tick box, really. You have to do
Mm.
this, then this, then this.
Mhm.
And then and I'm not saying that doesn't work. A lot of people have weight restored very effectively, but then when they're back out in the big wide world,
Mm.
it can suddenly become their responsibility and they haven't had responsibility before. And
Mhm.
that's too much. It's overwhelming. It's too much to handle. And the familiar, comfortable way of handling things is restriction.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I really have love about TBTS when I've treated frequently in other modalities of care or before I was trained in TBTS. There are so many amazing skills that we can teach coping, do this, don't do that, whatever it might be. Stick to this routine, stick to this plan. But the problem with that is that's a right now issue, and that's great. Like the
Mhm.
right now is awesome. But what about what's out beyond? So one of the things that I really love about TBTS is the fact that whether it's a trait expression, we're just going to try to transition it to productive. That productive trait presentation, I can't, if someone had told you to get rid of perfectionism, there's no way I could do that as a provider because it's part of you. It's your part of your genetic coding, right? So, but perfectionism is going to be a part of you while in a sick state. If we like, I want to put that in like the air quotes, in a sick state, whatever your illness is, but it's also part of you in a well state. And so we're talking about recovery now and like do this, don't do that in a sense. But we're also talking about how can you use this as a life thing for the rest of your life in a productive, helpful way. So it's helping people who often are sort of afraid of the future because it feels like they're walking blind into that future, not sure what it's like to live without this. Because when in
Yeah.
traditional treatments, I would oftentimes hear people say, "Well, you're going to tell me I just need to get rid of it," but it's part of who they are and the eating disorder has grabbed onto those traits. And so to imagine saying to a person, we're just going to rewire you to not do those things or be that way is saying that your biology is wrong or your traits are wrong. And it's like, no, I'm not going to take any of it away. We're just going to change the way they're presenting into the world, the way they're expressing into the world. So, and we're going to do that with your people. And I think that's the other part about TBTS is that we are big believers in bringing in your people. So bringing in your partner, bringing in your adult child, bringing in your best friend so that we can help you talk about who you are and help you hear the support and love from the people around you, not just your team of mental health providers or doctors who you're working with. So supports are also really
What
important.
what happens to people that don't feel they have support? Because anorexia is a very isolating illness,
Mhm.
and quite a few people just believe that they're completely on their own.
Yeah.
So how does that work if they don't feel they have somebody who they can bring in as support?
Yeah. It's a difficult conversation. I will say that it is probably one of the hardest conversations that we have is trying to find the somebody. And you're absolutely right. The longer the course of illness, I would say, in my experience of working with people, sadly, the more bridges that to connection have been lost probably due to the illness, unfortunately. And just like
Yeah.
what you said, isolating, the sort of the way that the eating disorder like just silently isolates and kills you through isolation ultimately, and just that lack of community and
Yeah,
connection.
I think I know I certainly used to cut people off to defend the eating disorder, to protect the eating disorder. If somebody mentioned something or brought something up or criticized the eating disorder in some way, I would always be leaping to the defense of the eating disorder and isolating myself further.
Yes, right. And that's really common. I mean, that's definitely unfortunate. I mean, such a sad thing because now you can look back at that and see the ways that that occurred in your own personal story.
Yes.
And even in like the height of your illness, if you reflect back on your own narrative, you know, were there people that were there, but you didn't know how to talk to them? You know, that maybe you felt like they were absolutely not there, and maybe they didn't feel like they were there, but had you been able to say, would you try to learn with me? You'd be surprised how many people say yes. So I think the difference between the supports, at least in my experience when I talk with people, and then the people that have been through a TBTS program, they would say the supports, if it initially felt like traditional kind of family therapy is what you were asking me to do, is to, if you were my sister, I would call you, Julia, my sister, and be like, hey, would you come to therapy with me? And it's TBTS isn't like come and let's do family process therapy, like talk it through, but rather it's will you come and be a part of my plan? Because what we do in that plan and what we refer to as a behavioral agreement is the language of TBTS that we go through helping people, each individual client, identify their traits, talk about their trait expression, and then we help them make a plan with their traits. But then to just do it on your own and then jump back into your real life, that's a big leap ultimately.
Mhm.
So having someone that's more there is like, hey, will you be a support to me so I can make a plan about how I'm going to use my traits differently? And I need support to do that, accountability to do that. And it's very specific. It's not, let's go to therapy and like talk about all the ways I've burned these bridges or talk about our relationship or talk, it's not that kind of therapy. It's more, will you be a part of my support team? Meaning it's not a carer. We don't call them carers because we're not asking you to be a caregiver for the patient. We really are asking you to supports to stand by their friend, their loved one, whoever it might be. So, for example, like to maybe make it come alive a little bit, in January, we had several people that came to care, and the supports were like a group of the presentation of the supports. I'm trying to find my words here. One woman brought, she was a young adult aged person, and she brought her parents and adult siblings. Another person who was an adult herself, who'd been suffering with this illness for 30 years, brought her sister-in-law. So not an immediate, like a person you'd immediately think about.
Mhm.
Another who'd been sick with anorexia, had the illness of anorexia and been really suffering for about 15 years, brought her a friend that was a good friend, maybe even like a best friend, but not a person that she spends a ton of time with, or it could be anybody. So it could be your classic parent-child kind of relationship. It could be a partner, one spouse, whoever, or it could be a more distant person. Dr. Hill talks about people that have brought like work friends or whatever it might be. It just has to be somebody that is willing to walk the road with you. So,
Okay.
yeah,
So did you say it was 5 days?
yes, 5 days, 5 days, all day for 5 days. And other people are like, it's only 5 days. I'm like, it's only 5 days, but it's a long 5 days. It's 5 days. And the model is designed for a person to come to the program. And so the client comes and brings their supports. In the adult program, they can bring up to 4. In the adolescent program, it's typically your primary caregiver, your parents, your guardian, whomever that might be. 18 and younger is that model. 18 and over is the adult model. And then you come from, it's all day. So you go 8 to 4, and then you're on your own in the evenings to be with your family or your supports, or on your own, whatever you do in your evening times. And during the day, the focus is on creating that plan. So we do a lot of psychoeducation, to everybody. The idea being that even those bridges that were burned with the support people, helping them understand the illness creates so much more empathy, so much more understanding as to why their loved one maybe has done the things they have done in the past, and the hope for the future, to understand that brain biology. So we provide a lot of psychoeducation. And then we go through a lot of experientials, ultimately, thinking about things like games or other activities, helping to make the information or the education kind of come alive in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so as it comes alive, what's happening is that people ultimately are in this place of understanding and education together at the same time. And then we practice and we practice and we practice and we practice and we practice all the different ways of using the traits and practicing them, doing the behaviors and the positive behaviors in a productive versus destructive way during that week. So lots and lots and lots of communal learning, lots of learning from other people in the room, not necessarily your traditional process therapy that you sort of think of in therapy. But so it's Monday through Friday, and then people go home to their home treatment team. So they go back to their primary therapist, or they go back to their medical doctors, or their whoever their support team is at wherever they are at home might be, whether it's here in the US, abroad, wherever. They'll go back to that treatment team, and they go home with a very specific list of things that they're committed to trying on. So just things that they want to try as far as trait expression goes, things that they want to try with their supports, new skills that blend cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, new tools that are TBTS specific that they want to try when those eating disorder symptoms or the urge to engage in an eating disorder symptom presents itself. It's a one-to-one. So we do things like this thing called the anxiety wave, that when my anxiety is at a 3, I'm going to do this instead of this. So it's very specific. And the more that we practice saying what we're going to do, trying it on, and then asking our supports to support us when that urge, eating disorder symptom, eating disorder behavior shows up, because we're trying to rewire the brain a different direction, it's going to take practice. So we practice that during that week, make that plan, and then the person goes home to their home treatment team to hopefully work on it with them down the road.
What if people don't have a home treatment team?
Yeah, that's true for a lot of people.
It is.
So we are trying, like we Brain-Based Therapy Northwest is going to work really hard. I personally, it's part of my work that I do, and I've hired a bunch of what we call family support specialists that help people identify what they can be doing at home when they get home if they don't have a team, or how we can help their team understand what we did during that week, so the therapist or the coach or whomever you're working with. But we're trying to compile a really pretty comprehensive list of providers that are willing to support people, whether it's remote or virtual, wherever you are in the world. So we're working on that. And the nice part about TBTS is that some of it, because you have your support people, they can actually also help support. They're not your
Mhm.
therapist. They're not your doctor. They're not meant to be. But what they are people that are able to come alongside you and genuinely just ask the question, and hopefully because they have the same amount of knowledge, education that they learned during the TBTS week, they're able to actually support and say the right thing. Versus so often we hear, I don't want to tell anybody about my eating disorder, because inevitably they're going to say things that are so triggering or not
Mhm.
helpful. But now these support people have the right knowledge. So if you don't have a treatment team, not that they are your supports are your treatment team, but you do now have people that can at least ask questions appropriately to help you stay committed to whatever the goals were they set in treatment. So
This
yeah.
sounds like it would just pair absolutely beautifully with coaching, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm going to send them to you. Is that a problem? Everybody's going to call you. So
Absolutely. No, virtual coaching, it would pair so beautifully.
yeah, here in the US, there's a virtual program called Equip, and they actually they are training their staff to do TBTS, which is super exciting. But virtual programs globally are
Mm.
really amazing because it is an opportunity to be able to receive that care in wherever you are globally, worldwide.
Well,
So
yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got clients in the States, in Canada. I've had clients in Australia. Yeah,
yeah,
the internet has opened up the whole world, hasn't it?
it has. Be careful because some of those places have Australia and Norway and the US now, and Greece are the 4 countries that have TBTS that are happening. So you might end up with a whole bunch of TBTS people post-care. So,
That would be fantastic because it really does go alongside how I coach
yeah,
so much.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so much. One thing I wanted to clarify is, well, I don't, clarify is probably the wrong word, but a lot of people, a huge amount of people, I'd actually go so far as to say most people, when they are wanting to recover from an eating disorder like anorexia, are searching for a magic pill or a magic wand. This is not that, is it?
no.
You still have to show up for yourself and do the work and be uncomfortable and all the stuff.
Yeah. TBTS is definitely not the magic pill, but in some ways, I think about it as the things that if I could go back into like the beginning of my career, and if I knew what I know today, I would say the thing I wish I knew today was you actually said it so well that some of the keys to recovery people already hold, but they are unfortunately showing up in the wrong way. So they're
Mhm.
expressed the wrong way. And so the more you understand yourself, the more you understand your brain functioning, kind of the why do I do these things, even though I don't want to, maybe, to understand the why, it's going to feel so uncomfortable, so scratchy, so itchy as we practice these new things, the more likely people are maybe going to persist to try to get to the other side of scratchy, to other side of uncomfortable, to then make it, is it going to be perfect? No. Are you going to, unfortunately, I don't like the word relapse or fail. I don't like those words, but go on a detour, yeah, probably sometimes. But that doesn't mean all things are lost. It does mean we're just going to have to try differently. So no, it's not a magic pill, but it's different. It offers more education. It offers more support for people where they are when they're there. And I think, and my clients that have been through the program, and I've used TBTS in an outpatient model for many years, feel like there's so much more hope. So, is it a magic wand to fix it? No. Is it have some, I think, this is my opinion, magical powers of hope? Yes. That isn't all about you're broken, you're wrong, it's forever, stop choosing this, whatever. Like the cultural language we hear. I think the magic is in the hope and the education and the understanding of the science that I think is really powerful personally. And what I watch in my clients and what I hear my clients say. So,
Having a why is
yeah.
incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
Having an actual why that's scientifically based, that shows that actually I'm not broken, this is not my fault,
Mhm.
it is simply the way my brain is wired,
Mhm.
and I can change that.
Mhm.
I can change the traits from destructive to productive. I can't change having those traits, no, but I can make them work for me rather than against me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So when a girl I saw many, many, many years ago, she was really funny because we did a chunk on the module of education. So we were talking about some of the brain pieces. And one of her biggest frustrations, and you hear this a lot with people that have anorexia, is I'm just not hungry, so I don't notice. And so she was really frustrated because her guardian at the time was like, just eat. Like, why don't you just eat? Like, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. And she got very angry and was like, well, I don't know when I'm hungry. Like, that's my problem. I don't know when I'm hungry. And my response was, well, of course you don't know that you're hungry because your insula is not working. And she's like, wait, what do you mean? And I was like, the part of your brain that like sends the message that like, hey, you're hungry. That people that don't have an eating disorder, that part of the brain like sends the tickle and they get up and they go to the kitchen and they make a snack. Well, you don't have that. So, or it's not working right now, or it's off, or I can't see into your brain, but that's the why. And she was like, okay, so then I should just set a clock, right? I should set an
Yeah.
alarm for me to go to the kitchen and make a snack, like at this time and this time, because that's about when a person who doesn't have an eating disorder, a normal eater, whatever that might be for you, a normal eater would go get their afternoon snack. And I was like, right. So she set an alarm and she would go get her snack at the time because it was more, she just didn't think about it because the insula didn't work. And for her, it was like, well, why didn't anyone tell me that before? And I was like, well,
Yeah, I
we just
totally
don't.
resonate with that.
So, it's small little things like that that I think are so big when that's a specific person's symptom profile, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's understand the why behind that specific thing. And let's just tweak it a little bit. There's no shame in that, but there had been so much shame for her when her dad was like, why didn't you eat your snack? And she's like, I just forgot. And it wasn't intentionally like resistant or malicious. It was, I didn't think about it. So,
Yeah, no, I completely resonate with that. Even when I was really close to being fully recovered and was starting to get busy and do things again, and I'd been regularly and religiously eating 3 meals, 3 snacks every single day. And then I started to get busy, and because my hunger signals had only just started to come back in, and they were quiet, very, very quiet, very unreliable, I
mhm,
forgot to eat for a day and a half because I was busy. I literally forgot. It didn't cross my mind.
mhm,
I didn't notice any hunger signals because I had my focus on other things.
mhm,
And when I realized, I was like, oh no,
yeah,
I don't want to go back down into the eating disorder. This was not deliberate. So I set alarms
yeah,
so that it wouldn't happen again.
right.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. And again, like we could perceive, like I would say, huh, it sounds to me like you're whatever you were doing, busy with work, persistence on like goal achievement, perfectionism on excelling at whatever the goals were. Those traits were really, really loud and really were highly productive in whatever the task was, but highly unproductive in your recovery. Both, right? So
Yeah.
the fix would be, well, I want to be really successful with my job, work, whatever the things were that took you away. And I have to do this. So the and is I set the alarms, which means that you're creative, solution focused. You took your same persistence trait to be successful in your job or whatever the task was you were working on, to be also and persistent in your recovery. So it's an and, right? Not a, well, you can't have both because it takes away from that. You can, it just has to be the and. So,
Oh, I always go for both and.
yeah.
Never
Yeah.
either or.
Mm,
Always both and.
both and, yeah. And that's what a TBTS at its finest is recognizing, okay, traits, the expression of traits are good and bad. But
Yes.
we want to try to keep them unfortunately, not too destructive. We want to try to keep them productive as much as we can.
So there's a lot of awareness and
Mm-hmm.
being curious
Mm-hmm.
involved as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's
Which
how
is
you grow,
so
isn't
fun.
it?
Yeah. And it's so much more fun than always being the expert in the room because I can be curious. I can listen and be curious and help people be curious about themselves. Like, what would happen? What if? You know,
Yeah,
it's not a, you have to do it all the time. Let's just do it right now. Let's just try it right now. And if it fails, well, that didn't work. Let's try the next thing. There's not about you failed at recovery. It's like that just didn't seem to work. So we got to figure out something different with who you are, your illness presentation, your trait presentation, and move forward. That's it. So,
I
and
don't believe in
understand the
failure.
biology. So,
Yeah, I don't believe in failure. I think
no.
things that don't work are just, you've learned what didn't work for you. It's a lesson. It's just time to look at a different route.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. And that's one of the fun, there's a ton of, we have what we call the TBTS toolbox. You can find it in the manual. You can buy online, but the TBTS toolbox has this like fun activity that we call, stop, reroute, reboot, reroute, right? So we just want to stop. Let's do something different. Like instead of going down that same eating disorder symptom path, whatever that is for you, we're going to stop. We're going to be really specific. Well, and I mentioned you were walking your dogs earlier. So instead of moving into some compensatory behavior, I'm going to stop. I'm not saying I'm not going to do the compensatory behavior. I'm going to stop and go walk the dogs first and then see where my brain is after I do a productive behavior versus a destructive eating disorder behavior. So we use what's in your life already, right? So I think that's kind of fun versus just do this skill, keep practicing this skill. Why doesn't this skill work? We need you to help us be the experts on your life, on your cadence, on your traits, and then we'll explain your biology to you. But we're going to have to use what you already know, what you already do in your life to be helpful.
Honestly, this has so overlaps the way I coach.
Yeah.
Often I'm like, okay, look around the room and
Mm-hmm.
tell me what you can see beginning with A, beginning with
Yeah.
B, beginning with C,
Mm-hmm.
or have some words and make more words out of them. And
Mm-hmm.
just an activity to take the focus away
Mm-hmm.
from the fear, the guilt, the desire to compensate in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and just it stops or quietens the ED noise for a little while and
Mm-hmm.
enables you to just step outside of that fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that eating noise is so powerful, but
So
they're
powerful.
so powerful, so strong, so loud. And we play with that noise. I have a recording that we've made of the noise. And so that recording, like we practice, what can we do when the noise is there? Because the noise, we can explain the noise to you from a biology perspective, a neurobiology perspective, exactly where there's the misfiring in the brain and why that noise is so loud and what it means. And we can make a plan for what to do when it's there. And whether
Mm.
that it's there at like the loudest volume you hear it, or maybe you hear it all the time at a low volume, whatever your volume is, we can help you make that plan with the noise until the noise is quieter down the road or different down the road. I can't predict the future, but I can predict the right now and tell you what's happening right now. And we can make a plan for the immediate what's next because we're just trying to do the next best decision, right? So
We only really have now, though.
I know exactly. But so we spend a lot of time worried about the future, but
We
let's just do
do.
the
But
now.
if we step back into the now and look around, we're safe. Everything's okay right
Mhm,
now.
mhm. It may not feel that way in the moment, but we can deal with the moment. So
Yes. Yeah. This has been such a fascinating conversation.
absolutely.
Where can people find out more?
Yeah, couple places. One, my website. So Brain-Based Therapy Northwest. So all one word. Don't forget the N and the W. Brain-Based Therapy Northwest has tons of information, just as far as what is TBTS, what are we offering as far as the 5-day goes. We offer 2 weekly just Q&A sessions. If a client or a support person just wants to pop in and ask questions, you heard something that we talked about today and you're like, what does that mean? Whether you're interested in therapy, whether you're a provider that's interested in learning a little more, we don't really care who pops in. We're just sitting there. Another principal provider and I are there. And those are on Tuesday, well, Pacific Standard Time. So you'll have to do the translation on that one. Pacific Standard Time, Tuesday mid-afternoon, and Sunday really early. The Sunday early time was designed for the UK, actually. We have seen historically, a lot of people actually have come up to the States for this form of treatment and then gone home. So it is open to people from the UK. So brainbasedtherapynorthwest.com. And if you're interested and you just like want to know the research and the data and like, what is she talking about? You can buy the actual book that you read, which was so impressive.
I'm still reading, and
Still
it's
reading.
really interesting. It's very scientific.
Very scientific, yes.
I'm
So
taking my time because there's so much information in there. I'm
yeah.
really trying to take it all on board and learn it.
Yeah, so you can read the book, which is the Temperament Based Therapy with Supports, and that's on Amazon or your local bookseller by Dr. Laura Hill, Stephanie Natzpack, and Christina Waringa. So you could either place. Those are the 2
I can
places.
put all this information in the show notes so people
Yeah.
can literally just click on links.
Mm-hmm.
And is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with?
No, so many things I could leave them with. I think the thing that I love the most about TBTS is that, the brain is malleable. We continue to wire and rewire, whether you're healthy and you're just supporting a loved one with an eating disorder, or you're the client or the patient and you have the eating disorder. We have the potential to wire and rewire our brain no matter how old you are. So things can always change. We're always changing. We're always growing. So live into who you are, because your temperament and your traits are so powerful. So
I love that. Live into who you are. And yes, there is always hope.
there
You've never
is.
been in it too long. You're not too old. There is always hope.
Yes.
So thank you everyone so much for listening. And Krista, thank you so much for coming on. It's been fantastic to have you here. What an amazing new treatment. So
Yeah, come join us. It's fun. It's fun to try it on. Give it a try.
thank you everyone for listening. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Bye.